Welcome everyone to our special assembly where we have Mr. Charles Duke speaking. In a moment, Rebecca will officially welcome him, one of our school captains, and his wife Dorothy, on behalf of the school. Welcome to any parents who are here and any other members of our local community. It's great to have you with us. Well, Mr. Duke was born in 1935 in North Carolina in the United States, and he obtained a science degree from the United States Naval Academy and a master's degree in aeronautics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He entered the American Air Force and eventually became a test pilot, testing the most advanced planes of his day. He was a member of the fifth group of 19 astronauts accepted by NASA in 1966 for training. You've likely heard his voice before in recordings of the landing of Apollo 11, the moon mission that took Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to the surface of the moon. Mr. Duke's voice guided them down to the surface when they only had seconds of fuel left. His flight was a bit later, Apollo 16, the second last moon landing, which meant that he ended up being the 10th man to walk on the moon, and as it happens, he was the youngest as well, in April 1972, over 42 years ago. He's been very successful in business, in property development, in the beverage business, and he's now active in Christian ministry. And he's very ably supported in every way by his wife, Mrs. Dorothy Duke. They have two sons, one's in the finance sector and the other's airline pilot, and they have families of their own, and Mr. and Mrs. Duke now have 9 grandchildren. I'm going to invite Rebecca to come up and she'll welcome you to the school on our behalf.
I'd like to welcome Mr. and Mrs. Duke to the clinic campus of Ivanhoe Grammar School and to say how pleased we are to have them here and for Mr. Duke to be speaking to us today. We are very honoured to have such an inspirational speaker who has led such a remarkable life, having been one of only 12 astronauts to walk the moon. I'm sure that he will tell us more about that, and I know that we are very keen to hear what he has to say this morning. So please give him a warm welcome as he comes up to speak to us today.
Thank you very much for your warm welcome. Delight to be back in Melbourne and have an opportunity to speak to your school this morning. Thank you very much for inviting us. I hope you find this presentation inspirational, informative, and entertaining. I'll try to do my best to tell you the thrill and the excitement and the adventure of a moonwalk. Little did I realize when I was your age that I would walk on the moon. There wasn't any space program when I was in grammar school. There was no astronaut program, and so nobody had that dream of going to the moon. I did not go out in the backyard and look up into the sky with my mom and say, "Mom, one day I'm going to walk on the moon." Mom would have sent me to the psychiatric hospital for tests because it was just not even a wildest dream. My school, my town where I grew up in South Carolina was 8,000 people. We had one grammar school, one high school, one intermediate school, which is in between. We had those sort of 3 levels back in those days, still do actually. But I had a dream, and my dream was to serve my country. And that dream started to develop when I was about in the 8th grade, 9th grade. And by the 10th grade, I knew that's what I wanted to do, was to be a naval officer like my father was in World War II. So my heroes in those days was the generation that fought in World War II. My father actually served in the South Pacific on the northern side of some of the islands on the northern side of your great country. And so when he came back, we moved back to South Carolina, his home state, area where I was born with my twin brother. And I began having this dream of going and to serve my country. So my dream wasn't very big at that time. It was basically get out of school, get into college, and then become a naval officer. And if there's a title for this talk, it's Dream and Dream Big for each of you. You never know what life's going to hold for you as you plan your life, as you set goals for yourself, as you dream about the future. Don't close off anything because you never know what will happen. And that was true in my life. I couldn't, from my high school, or I couldn't get to the university where I wanted to go with the Naval Academy, so I went off to prep school. And I went to a boarding school in Florida called Admiral Farragut Academy, and was there for 2 years. And it prepared me for college, the Naval Academy, and it prepared me for life. Being on your own at 15 in a boarding school, you mature quickly. It was a military background, and I enjoyed it thoroughly because I like discipline and I like order in my life. And it was also an adventure, and I was developing an interest in adventure and exploration. So I get to the Naval Academy, and a strange thing happens. I fall in love with airplanes instead of ships. And so I began to dream about being a pilot. And I had a choice, naval aviation or Air Force. There was no Air Force Academy back in those days, and so we could volunteer for the Air Force. That decision was made for me actually by a doctor at the Naval Academy, who examined me one day and says to me, Midshipman Duke, you have a slight problem with your right eye, and you don't qualify for naval aviation, but the Air Force will take you. And so I was sworn in as a lieutenant in the Air Force and began flight training in the summer of 1957. A very important year in the space business. That was the year the Russians launched the Sputnik in October of that year that went around the world beeping at us. And it really got everybody's attention. The U.S. we thought we were the champions in technology, but the Russians beat us. Several years later, President Eisenhower started NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration. The first group of astronauts were selected, and we began to look forward to and dream about putting human beings in space. The Russians at first put dogs, we put chimpanzees into space. And in 1961, I'm now a pilot in Germany, enjoying my job. It was a good career, an exciting job, and the first astronauts were launched and cosmonauts were launched into space. Yuri Gagarin was the first, a Russian, and then Alan Shepard went into space and back down again for our first American in space. 2 weeks later, a very outstanding leader, President of the United States, named John Kennedy, announced that we were going to go to the moon, we're going to land on the moon, and we're going to return safely by the end of 1969. And he did that with 15 minutes experience in space for the United States. We hooted at him, yeah, sure, we're going to land. And, we didn't think it was possible as a young lieutenant. Some of you are old enough to remember rocketry back in the 1960s. It was 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blow up rather than lift off. We didn't have very much success. But he committed us, and the country got behind it, the goal. We were going to beat the Russians to the moon, and so the country started working hard. The Air Force offered me an opportunity to go back and get a master's degree in aeronautics and astronautics, which I accepted, and I went to MIT, and there worked on the Apollo guidance and navigation system, met some astronauts, and my dream began to expand because these were the most exciting men I'd ever met. I'd never seen anybody so excited about their job as these astronauts were. And so they were so dynamic and so excited, and they were following the development of the systems which I was working on. And so I got to know them well, and they said, you ought to be an astronaut, Charlie. You got the qualifications if you go to test pilot school. I said, okay. I broadened my horizons, and when I got my master's degree off, I went to test pilot school as a volunteer. I don't know about you, but in my life, I volunteered for everything. And everything I volunteered for was an exciting opportunity for me. It put me in position eventually to become an astronaut. After test pilot school, I volunteered for the space program and fortunately got selected in 1966. My wife Dorothy and I had our first son in California where we were in test pilot school. Then we moved to Houston to start our training. Most people think astronauting is not a hard job. You know, you just sort of get ready and launch to the moon or launch wherever you're going to launch. But nobody sees the thousands of hours of training it took to prepare yourself to get to the moon. Spacecraft are complicated and they can be dangerous if you make the wrong choices of decisions, and so you need how to learn how to fly. And we spent 2,000 hours in the simulator learning how to fly these spacecraft. I crashed on the moon 1,000 times at least during training, but we landed 3,000 times and we were prepared. I had to learn geology. The whole purpose of going to the moon was to pick up rocks, and so we learned geology. What kind of rocks to pick up? How do you examine rocks in a faraway place like the moon? So we were prepared when we got ready to go. I was fortunate to work on 5 of the 9 missions that went to the moon. I was in mission control, as you heard in my introduction, for Apollo 11. That was the first landing on the moon. And we had some serious problems, but the teamwork and mission control and the whole of NASA, including the tracking stations here in Australia, were able to solve the problem and overcome a lot of difficulties that we were experiencing as we started down at the moon. And as Mr. Grant said, we landed with 17 seconds fuel remaining on that first mission. It was very, very close to having it on board. But it was successful. And then we had a series of successes. Apollo 13 was a big tragedy. Fortunately, nobody was killed, but the spacecraft blew up on the way to the moon due to an oxygen tank problem. And we were barely able to get them recovered safely, but we did. It was another triumph of the teamwork and the expertise and of NASA delivering under pressure. And so now I have an opportunity to fly. I was on Apollo 16, and so on the 16th of April, 1972, we were finally ready to launch. We trained for 2 years, and we were ready to launch. No more training, let's go. And so to give you a sense of scale, I have a video I'm going to show you in a moment, but to give you some sense of scale, this Saturn rocket that we flew to the moon was the biggest rocket ever launched. It was 110 meters tall. It was 10 meters in diameter and weighed 3 million kilograms as it sat on the launch pad. There were 5 engines at the bottom of this rocket pushing with 3.5 million kilos of thrust, and so we had 3.5 million pushing 3 million. So it didn't go into space real quickly. It just slowly started to move, but the vibration from side to side was intense. In Apollo, at this point of the flight, you can't see outside. The windows are covered over, and so you're just looking at your instrument panel. If you can imagine taking your seat and pushing it over backwards, and looking at the roof of this building, that would be the position you were in when you were in a spacecraft. You're strapped in very tightly. As you look through the door, I was on the right side. There was a TK Mattingly was center, and my commander, John, was on the left. And John and I would eventually walk on the moon, while Mattingly would orbit the moon while we were on the moon. And so that was the position we were in, and the vibration, the instrument panel was shaking. I got a little nervous. I didn't think anybody was had not told me it was going to shake so hard. But we would go, the mission control and the trajectory looked good, and so we just shook our way for the first 2 minutes and 40 seconds. At that point, we shut down the engines, and then eventually we made it into orbit. When I got home, I asked the doctor, I said, what was my heartbeat at liftoff? I was very excited. He said, yes, you were, Charlie. It was 144 per minute. And so my heart was really pounding. It was like good exercise. And I said, well, I was excited. And I said, well, how about my teammates? How about John, the commander? He said his heartbeat was 70. So he was cool. He was the cool one in the flight. He had flown a Saturn before, so he knew all about it. So we orbited the Earth at 160 kilometers, and over Australia, we accelerated to 40,000 kilometers per hour, and we were on our way to the moon. Shortly thereafter, we turned the spaceship around and to retrieve the lunar module, and out into my window, now uncovered, so I could see out, the Earth floated into view. It's the most awesome sight I'd ever seen. Breathtaking, as you can imagine. There was the Earth, 40,000 kilometers away, and it was just suspended in the blackness of space. We could see the Arctic Circle down across Canada, the U.S., Mexico, Central America, the Eastern Pacific, the Gulf of Mexico, and a little bit of the Caribbean Sea. Well, that was the view we had. There were three colors: the pure white of the snow and the clouds, the brown of the land, and this crystal blue of the ocean. And there's this jewel of Earth just suspended in the blackness of space. And everywhere else you looked except for the moon, it was black. You don't see the stars in space. The stars are not visible. All you do is you look out and see blackness. The reason the stars aren't visible, it's always daylight. The sun's always shining between Earth and the moon. So there's no night in space. So you don't have night like here where you can look up and see the stars. Outside, if we go outside, you know, right now you'd look up and you see a blue sky. The stars are there, but you can't see them because the sun's shining. Well, in space, the sun always shines, but the sky has any color because there's no atmosphere up there. And so you just look out into this blackness of space and the invisibility of the stars, if you will. So in space, how do you tell time? There's no sunrise, sunset. And so we had a clock in the spacecraft, and the clock started when you left the Earth, lifted off, the clock started. It counted 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. When we came back to Earth 11 days later, the clock read 265 hours and so many minutes. So our flight plan and our schedule was based on that clock. Because every time you looked out, it was daylight. So to go to sleep, we'd put some curtains up and turn out the lights and made it night inside the spacecraft, and though we were in brilliant sunlight the whole way to the moon. We landed at a place called Descartes. So as you look at the moon from the Earth, we were almost in the center of the full moon. It was the mountains of the moon, about 7,000 feet, let's say 2,500 meters above what we would call sea level. It was we were the only mission to land up into the mountains of the moon, or the highlands they called it. And the rocks were unique, and that's why they selected it. And so we were to explore this area of the moon for 72 hours that we were on the moon. We had a car that we had called the lunar rover. We had a spacecraft that we lived in, and it was actually very comfortable on the moon. We felt right at home. There was no sense of danger. There was no sense of evil. No aliens could come out behind a rock. It was totally uninhabited. Never had been any life on the moon. Never had been any atmosphere on the moon, actually. And so it was, the rocks were as dry as you can imagine, dry as toast. Since there was no atmosphere, no water, it was mostly gray in color, with a very sharp contrast between the gray of the moon and the blackness of space. While we were on the moon for 72 hours, it was always daylight. Sunrise to sunset on the moon's 2 weeks. And so it was always daylight. And we were there during the morning of the moon day. The sun was climbing slowly in the sky. The surface of the moon was getting hotter and hotter. We started at like 35 degrees centigrade on the surface, average. And when we left the moon, it was probably 130 degrees centigrade temperature. But our spacesuits protected us from that. It was exciting on the moon, to say the least. I was like a little boy at holiday. I was running around and describing rocks and jumping up and down and just having an enthusiastic time, because I love adventure and I love to explore. So what's over the next ridge? The moon was very rough. It was up and down and craters everywhere and rocks and blocks of stone everywhere. The surface is covered with dust, very, very fine, like powder. It's actually pulverized rock. And everywhere you walked, you left your footprints. As you'll see in the film here, the footprints everywhere. And so you never worried about getting lost on the moon. You just turned around and followed your tracks back, and that took you back to your home base. So let's start the video here. And I call it original title, Moonwalk. Walker. So the rocket is beginning to move here, and very slowly at first, because of just a differential of weight. You see the white stuff falling off here. That's actually ice. There were several tons of ice had formed on the vehicle due to the fuel is very, very cold. Well, within the first few seconds, all the ice was shaken off. And so we began our journey. We're up here at the very top, at this point right here. The first stage of the rocket with these 5 enormous engines. They lasted for 2 minutes and 40 seconds. It took us to an altitude of about 50 kilometers, a velocity of probably 8,000 kilometers per hour. And as we burned out the fuel, of course, the rocket accelerated. The thrust was constant, and so the weight got less, and so the acceleration increased. And so by the time the first stage finished, we were accelerating at 4.5 times gravity. That means multiply your weight here on Earth by 4.5, and that would be how much we weighed as we were accelerating into orbit. It was a tremendously vibrating 2 minutes and 40 seconds, as I said to you earlier. And here's the first stage shutdown. It begins to fall away here. The engines stop, and so you go from 4.5 times gravity to 0 at the snap of a finger. And so there's a big deceleration at first, but you're strapped into your seat so you stay oriented. And from the Earth, it looks like that's a big explosion. Then the inner stage falls away. The first stage is down here, right here as it falls away. And you see the blue of the Atlantic Ocean. Florida is back over here on the horizon of the Earth. Here's the picture of the Earth I mentioned to you. This is the coast of California. Los Angeles is in here, the Sierra Nevada Mountains, Baja California, the Rocky Mountains here, the Great Plains of the U.S. Southwest in here, Mexico in here, Florida back over in this point over here, and the Arctic Circle and Canada up in the left side. To give you an idea of how crowded it is in the spacecraft, I inserted this little sequence. Here's T.K. Mattingly. He's exercising while John and I are just playing around with some a checklist and spoons and things to give you a sense of what it's like in zero gravity. It was very easy to lose objects in zero gravity because nothing stays still. You cannot stop something from moving. And here, right here is a flashlight. The food in Apollo was plastic bags, dehydrated, This is not, this is grape juice, and this is space shuttle, and it takes the shape of a shape. And now here we go with a flying banana. We didn't have any bananas in Apollo. As I said, most of our food was dehydrated. Though we did have peanut butter and jelly, and we could make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It took 3 days to get to the moon, and so here we are now in lunar orbit, orbiting the moon. And John Young and I are in this spaceship. He's looking out of this window, I'm out of this window. Here is a door or a hatch, and you open that door when you get on the moon. It's about 1 meter across. Climb out backwards on your hands and knees onto this porch, down the ladder, onto the footpad, and you could step onto the moon. To give you a sense of size, from the footpad to the door was about 5 meters, and the lunar module weighed about 19,000 kilograms as we started our descent. We had some problems in this spacecraft. It delayed our landing about 6 hours, but 6 hours behind schedule we began our descent. Here is the Earth. Now we're about 2,000 meters above the moon. We recognize these 2 large craters, and we knew we were almost on target. So we picked out a spot that looked fairly level. We didn't know until we touched down, but it looked good. And at about 15 meters, we began to blow out the dust. At about 6 meters, we level off, but then we start on down. And when we touch the moon, we stop the engine, and the dust clears instantly because there's no atmosphere to swirl the dust around like down here when we have strong winds and a dusty environment. Notice the darkness of the shadow, but the brightness of the sunlight. The moon was very, very bright. As you can imagine, on a full moon, you can read a newspaper on Earth with a full moon. Well, up on the moon, you're in this bright sunlight, this brilliant sunlight all the time, so you have your sun visors down. Here I am outside now with a camera. We didn't have any digital cameras, so this is a film magazine I'm putting on the camera, and it's dusty, so I'm going to blow the dust off through my visor. Of course, that didn't work. The visor is a visor. You can't blow through the visor, so the camera, the film stayed dusty. Then we put up the flag. It's held out by something like a curtain rod here. Here I am here. John Young comes out on the left. We have a camera that's mounted on our car, and it was controlled by an engineer in Mission Control in Houston, Texas. John gives a big jump for joy as he salutes the flag, and then he gives it again, and then we swap places. Down here on Earth, with all of my equipment on, I weighed 164 kilograms, up on the moon, 24 kilograms. My most embarrassing moment, I'm the guy just disappeared off to the right here, and I'm carrying $10 million of moon experiments in this little canister right here, and as I jog along, they fall off. And that was really embarrassing. All experiments gone, it's disaster. But fortunately, in 1/6 gravity, they just hit very gently, and we were deployed them all, and they all worked. So nothing was damaged to my thanks. And here's John running across the moon. You can see how dusty it gets, and you cannot see your feet in Apollo suits. So you end up tripping a lot. We fell down a lot. One you'll see here in a moment. I'm drilling a hole into the moon. I had 3 of those to do. They were each 3 meters deep. This is our data station and our power station. And John was deploying that with some problems. Here I am now taking this picture of the car. It was a little electric car, and you can see the roughness of the moon. Watch that tire off the ground. And we were fortunate we had seat belts because you can see the roughness of the ride up on the moon. There are no roads on the moon, but there's no traffic either, so that was an advantage. Here we are with an experiment, and down I go. So now I got to get up, so I get on a push-up position and start to push. That's not good enough, so let's try again, and that's almost, and up he comes. The suit was very stiff, and it was very difficult to get up. Normally we collected moon rocks and soil samples together. It was a lot more efficient. Here I am with a rake, and we've got rocks of certain size, and we're pouring them into these little plastic bags. We call them sample bags. Notice back in the background here, there's some white rock. The moon was mostly gray, but some rocks, like you see, were white, some were black, but generally just shades of gray. Here I am trying to do a collection by myself, and you can see that's not working very well. And so but I'm determined, and I'm going to collect that rock. And so this time I'm more gentle with the shovel, and I pitch it up, and I collect it. I grab it with my right hand, but drop the bag I was putting it in. So we had a lot of little setbacks like that on the moon. Everything didn't go exactly right, but we were able to collect over 3 days 98 kilograms of lunar material. We lived in the upper portion of the lunar module. We actually had 3 rest periods during our 72 hours. We ate 2 meals, one when we woke up, one before we went to sleep, and the rest of the time we were just in our spacesuit. Now, this is the most dangerous moment for me and the scariest. I'm setting the moon high jump record, and there I go over backwards. That backpack was fiberglass and contained all the life support systems. And if I landed on it and it broke open, I'm dead like that. So you can imagine, I didn't panic. I rolled right and broke my fall. Ended up on my back, but everything was okay, but my heart was pounding. Mission Control had seen this. My wife Dorothy was in Mission Control, and there were a lot of gasps that she said at Mission Control. I left a picture of our family on the moon. Our 2 sons were young at the time, of course, and on the back of the picture we had written, "This is the family of astronaut Charlie Duke from planet Earth who landed on the moon in April 1972, and we signed our names." Picture's still there, by the way. Here we go back into orbit, taken by the camera that was left on the car. The car is still there, and so it has a dead battery, and you can see the car from some of the photographs that were taken by a recent orbiting spacecraft around the moon. Here we come for rendezvous. We eventually jettisoned this piece at the moon and eventually crashed, and we came home in what we call the command module. Here's the Earth. Now this is the fireball as we entered the Earth atmosphere at over 41,000 kilometers per hour. It got white hot outside, about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside, it was 22 degrees centigrade. The spacecraft could roll back and forth like this, as you see, to control our landing spot in the middle, well, not in the middle, but in the Pacific Ocean. Our landing was south of Hawaii, maybe 3,000 kilometers. All of the Apollo landings came in the Pacific Ocean at various spots. At about 30,000 meters, you're basically falling straight down. At 6,000 meters, the parachute sequence begins. A stabilization chute gets you in a proper position. And then at about 3,000 meters, the main parachutes start to deploy. This was critical. Apollo all landed on parachutes, and you needed the parachutes for safe completion of your mission. Without the parachutes, you hit the water very hard. The spacecraft would split open. You were probably killed on impact. But fortunately, in all of Apollo, all the parachutes deployed, And so we slowly settled down to the Pacific Ocean. This film is being taken by a helicopter in our recovery area, and they picked us up, and so here we are at Splashdown. And so mission complete. We were the 5th landing on the moon, and I was number 10. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you. That's all right. So you can see what started out as a little dream became a big dream. And I was very fortunate to be one of the 12 men in all of history who walked on the moon. Little dream became a big dream because I applied myself, I studied hard, I opened my vision to what was available. And so that's the lesson for you all, both the young ones and the old ones here. The Bible talks about us being a 3-part being: mind, body, spirit. We all are that way. We all have a mind, we all have a body, and we all have a spiritual dimension to us. And I liken it to a 3-legged stool, and mind, body, spirit are the legs of our life. And if you lose one of your legs, have you ever tried to balance on a 2-legged stool? Life is out of balance. You're out of balance. It's hard. And so I encourage you, as you go through life, to remember your mind, body, spirit. So take advantage of your education opportunities. You have been given a wonderful opportunity by your parents and others who have sent you to the school. But it's your responsibility to study hard and to take advantage of it. You can do it, or you can decide not to do it. You can loaf your way through school, or you can apply yourself in school. And I urge each of you to apply yourself and learn to the best of your ability. Also, remember, you have one body. God's given you one body, and you need to take care of it. And so don't abuse your body. You will find if you abuse your body, you're going to reap what you sow. The Bible says if you sow disaster, you're going to reap disaster. If you sow corn, you're going to reap corn, for instance. And so whatever you sow into your body is what you're going to reap. So take care of your body. And then thirdly, take care of the spiritual side. Have that relationship with God. Seek His direction. Seek His purpose for your life. Unfortunately for me, I was successful in life, but I had forgotten the spiritual side until I was 42 years old. And at 42 years old, I made a commitment to seek God's direction in my life, and I experienced peace. My wife Dorothy also made that decision, and it changed our lives. And so now we are involved in Christian ministry, but I'm also involved in motivational speaking like this morning, and I hope that you can take this lesson back to heart. Dream big. Don't close some of the possibilities in your life. In my case, I loved adventure and I loved exploration. And I got to explore the vastness of God's creation as the moon. Some of you might get to go to Mars, or some of you might get to go back to back to the moon. Who knows? I'd like to introduce my wife, Dorothy. If you'd stand up, I want to see you stand up with me. She's our constant companion. We've been married 51 years last June, so it's been a wonderful life together. We've had some ups and downs, as you can imagine. I'm not a perfect husband, nor she is a perfect wife. You'll find as you grow up, if you aren't married, you'll find when you do get married, and nobody's perfect. So be forgiving, be forbearing. We heard a sermon in the cathedral just last Sunday about forbearance and forgiveness. And those are two words that are very, very important. So bear with one another and also forgive one another when you're offended. And that pleases God, and it will restore relationships. So it's been a pleasure here. I think we have a few questions that were submitted. So your chaplain is going to either give me the questions or read the questions. I'm not sure exactly what, but here we are.
Why don't we thank Charlie?
Thank you.
Now, I've collated the questions. A number of students emailed me questions. So we're going to have time for maybe 3 or 4 of those questions that we'll put to you. And Jen has had a look at the questions. Have you got one to kick us off, Jen? So right into the microphone so we can all hear the question. Thank you.
What was the first thing you thought when you walked on the moon?
Which one is that? Oh, what was my first thought when I got to the moon? Excitement and wonder, actually. And the thought occurred to me, nobody's ever been here before. It was the most amazing thought. You're looking out at this moon that's untouched, and nobody had ever been there before. And that thought kept occurring the whole 3 days I was there. Okay?
Do you have any examples from the moon yourself?
Do we have any moon rock samples? No, they wouldn't allow us to keep moon rocks. If they found out we pinched a moon rock, we would be trouble. So we turned them all in. Coming back, we didn't have them all in bags, and they would occasionally one would float by in our spacecraft. Oh, there's another one. I put that in my pocket, and there's another one I put back in my pocket. And so when I got home, I had a pocket full of moon rocks, and I took them home and showed them to Dorothy and our boys and my parents and siblings and all of that. But I said, I got to turn these back in, so I turned them into NASA. Eventually, they did give us one. But with a stipulation, we'll give you a moon rock, but you got to give it to somebody, like a museum or whatever. So I chose to give it to my prep school. And so my prep school in Florida is now a proud owner of a moon rock. And by the way, my prep school had 2 moonwalkers graduated from this high school. The only one in the United States to do that. So they're very, very proud of that. Go ahead.
Were you a little bit scared from the Apollo 13 incident and having any second thoughts about going to the moon?
Did I have any second thoughts? No, I was excited. I wanted to go. In fact, I would try to go again. And I was backup crew on Apollo 17 after 6 months after we got back. And I tried to break the other guy's leg, but he wouldn't let me close to him. No, we really wanted to go, and everybody dreamed about it, and everybody didn't get to go because there were 40 astronauts then, and only 24 of us got to go to the moon, and only 12 of us got to walk on the moon.
Did going to the moon change the person you are now?
No, it didn't. It was a moon mission to me was an adventure. I was like an explorer, and so my focus was the operations side of it, and to make sure we did a good job and we did everything that we were supposed to do. So your focus was the operational and the adventure of it. It wasn't spiritual, and it wasn't philosophical. You don't have time to sit there and ponder questions of life. You're just busy. And so while I back then believed in God, it was out there somewhere, and so it didn't bring me closer to God. That came later on due to a personal experience I had, actually at a Bible study.
When did you start to believe in Jesus?
When did I start to believe in Jesus? In 1978, 6 years after I got back from the moon. My wife, Dorothy, had come to the Lord in 1975. We were having trouble in marriages. It was very stressful life as an astronaut. And so it caused a lot of problems. Dorothy was on the verge of suicide at times. And some people came to our little parish church and shared the love of God and the relationship with Jesus, and she opened her life to that. And I watched her change from sadness to joy. So 2.5 years later, I had an experience, as I said a moment ago, at a Bible study at a tennis club, where I said, "Oh Lord, what I really need for peace in my life is you. Please come into my life." And that started a change in our relationship, change in our marriage, and changing our focus to seek God in all that we do. And so since that time, we've been, in my businesses, I have been involved to seek God's direction in all that I do and all that I say. And it's been a very rewarding life for us. And so we're here to share our faith and to share this adventure that hopefully we can influence some of you to not close off that dream, but dream big, or maybe just dream and you'll be surprised. You never know what's going to happen in your life. So we can't all walk on the moon together, but we can all walk with God together. So let's do that to the best of our ability. God bless you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Duke, for being so honest and even a bit vulnerable with us this morning. I'm going to invite one of our school captains, Matt, who's going to thank Mr. Duke on behalf of all of us. And our primary school captains are going to present Mr. and Mrs. Duke with a little gift on behalf of all of us. So listen to Matt, please.
On behalf of the school, I would like to thank Mr. Charles Duke and Mrs. Dorothy Duke for visiting our campus today. I know that many of us, after hearing that extraordinary journey, can be inspired to dream and dream big, as he said, Mr. Duke, and ultimately work hard to achieve our dreams. I'd like to wish you and your wife all the best for the rest of your tour of Australia, and hope you have safe travels.
Dorothy and I appreciate this gift. We really enjoy being here, have an opportunity to speak to you all. This audience reminds me of our grandkids. We've got them from 6 years old to 22-year-olds, and they're just a precious part of our lives now. So thank you for making us feel so at home. I have a picture for the school I'd like to autograph. Unfortunately, I don't have it up here with me, but I'll get it done and leave it with the staff. Again, God bless you. Thank you very much.
And speaking of your grandchildren, Mr. Duke, what we've given Mr. Duke is a little collection of Australian children's literature, which he can take back and give to his grandchildren. So I hope they enjoy that. Good.
Maybe you can take our one. Maybe you take it for you to take on one.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
So, yeah, and I find it's very nice if you're willing to listen and just simply...
Yeah, they are.
We both got choices to make.
Like what kind of choice?
I think I will.
Her mother went to Liberal Arts College, but she wants to go to...
We'll just do some, just make on this.
Oh. That's great. Okay.
Thank you very much for inviting us and letting us come to your school. And we love kids, and our grandkids are very special in our lives, and to try to influence them and to see that influence that we can have on other kids around the world is just really very special for Dorothy and I. And so thank you so much for inviting us and giving us this opportunity to meet all y'all and to have an opportunity to meet the kids and pictures taken and shake hands and high five a few.
High fives.
So it's just been very, very special. We enjoy it thoroughly, and we want to thank Warwick for where he is.
He's running around doing a few things.
And for helping organize and this schedule. We were here a couple of years ago and met him, and that meeting has evolved into a week here with various schools around the Melbourne area. So we're delighted to be here, and just encourage you to encourage the kids because they're our future, and we need to mentor them and motivate them as they grow up. So thank you so much. God bless you.